Mr. Speaker, it's a great honor and privilege for me to address this august House and through you, the people of Zambia. This is my first address to this House as Republican President. It comes in the wake of our Jubilee celebrations last October, when the country marked 50 years of independence. The celebrations were a fitting tribute to our founding fathers and mothers, as well as men and women who have contributed in various ways to make Zambia what it is today. I say thank you to the multitudes of Zambians who turned up for the celebrations across the country, and to those who contributed their time, resources, and talents to make our Jubilee such a special occasion. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, 4 days after the Jubilee mark, on 28th October 2014, our celebrations were cut short by the sad passing on of our beloved Republican President, His Excellency Mr. Michael Chilufya Sata. This was indeed a trying moment for the nation, as we had once again lost a sitting president. The late president was a gallant leader who served the people of Zambia selflessly and with great passion. His legacy will indeed live on. The nation also lost 2 members of parliament during the 4th session of the 11th National Assembly. These were Honorable Tifita Matafwali, Member of Parliament for Bangweulu constituency, and Honorable Humphrey Ido Mwanza, Member of Parliament for Solwezi West constituency. May I request the House to rise and observe a minute of silence in honor of our departed dear President and the 2 honorable members of Parliament. May their souls rest in eternal peace. Mr. Speaker, arising from the deaths of the mentioned members of Parliament, the Chawama by-election caused by my election as President, and from court nullifications of some of the members of Parliament who won their seats during the 2011 general elections, by-elections were held in 13 constituencies. Allow me to recognize the 13 elected and 2 nominated new members of Parliament. I wish to warmly congratulate them and welcome them to the House. It is, however, regrettable to note that incidences of violence reoccurred in some constituencies during the by-elections. I urge political parties and players to adhere to the electoral code of conduct each time there are elections. I direct once again the Inspector General of Police to develop and strictly enforce new measures to prevent violence during elections. Mr. Speaker, it has been 8 months since I assumed office. Let me take this opportunity to thank the people of Zambia for the support I have received so far. I look forward to their continued support in the years to come. I come to address this House at a time when the nation is facing the most challenging energy shortage since the founding of this great nation. The power rationing due to reduced water levels in our power generation dams has impacted severely and negatively on the lives of our people. I hear the cry of that welder whose income has dwindled due to power load shedding. That marketeer, that chicken grower who cannot put up with the repeated power disruptions. I feel the frustration of those workshop mechanics in Chawama, barbershop and market store owners, countrywide of course, whose income has declined as a result of power shortage. I feel your pain. I share your frustrations. No one feels the anguish of the current power shortages more than I do. The burden of your frustrations falls squarely on my shoulders. But let me assure the nation that my government, your government, our government, has rapidly moved to address the power shortage. I will later in this speech announce the specific measures to deal with this problem. During the fourth session of the 11th National Assembly, the honorable members debated seriously and at times delicate matters of national importance in a way which upheld transparency and accountability. The House considered a total of 847 questions for both oral and written answers, 7 private members' motions, 32 parliamentary committee reports, 47 ministerial statements, 50 annual reports, and passed 22 government bills. I would like to express my gratitude to you, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Deputy Speaker, and the Honorable Deputy Chairperson of committees of the whole House for the diligent, efficient, and impartial manner with which you presided over the business of the House. I also thank the Clerk of the National Assembly and her staff for the services rendered to the nation. Let me also congratulate Zambia's first ever female leader of government business in the House, Her Honor, Mrs. Inonge Wina, MP, Vice President of the Republic of Zambia. Her able leadership is a source of pride for the House and indeed the whole country and Africa as a whole. Mr. Speaker, this session of the National Assembly is unique for a number of reasons. Firstly, it is the final session of the 11th National Assembly before the next general elections in 2016. Secondly, it is during this session that this House will be considering the Constitution Amendment Bill 2015. Thirdly, having attained 50 years of independence, Zambia has entered a new phase of socio-economic transformation for the next 50 years. This is in tandem with the African Union Agenda 2063, which highlights our aspirations, and I quote, to build an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, an Africa driven and managed by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena, end of quote. This, I must say, compels us to reflect on the destiny of our country as ordained by God. We must apply our talents to fulfill that destiny. Let us therefore create the future that we want. The future that we want. Let me turn to the theme of my address this morning. Mr. Speaker, it's against this background that we, as a nation, need to be adaptive, innovative, and determined to change the way we do things. In this regard, the theme for my address is embracing a transformational culture for a smart Zambia now. Embracing a transformational culture for a smart Zambia now. To attain this transformation, we need to change the way we think, behave, and do things. Zambians deserve the very best, and we are determined to ensure that this is achieved. Mr. Speaker, our transformational culture should therefore start with each and every one of us getting involved in this transformation. We must leave the past behind us and embrace positive attitudes in all our endeavors. We must transform ourselves by 1, embracing innovation and entrepreneurship. 2, adopting a new paradigm to resolving our current and future challenges. 3, embracing technology to simplify and quicken provision of services. 4, realigning our institutions where necessary to make them more responsive to the needs of the nation. 5, being patriotic and putting the nation before our personal interests.
Repeat that.
Only Mr. Speaker can order me here. 6, promoting cost-effective operations in government to eliminate waste and abuse of public resources. 7, embracing high aspirations and the courage to achieve them with a strong sense of vision and mission. 8, promoting and maintaining a clean, healthy, and safe living and working environment. 9, transiting towards a green economy. 10, fostering win-win partnerships within and outside the country to achieve national development and to fulfill the needs of our people. 11, creating smart institutions and smart budgeting that promote a whole of government approach to public service delivery. 12, promoting a culture of saving among citizens to promote investment and growth. 13, promoting punctuality and efficiency to enhance productivity. Promoting punctuality and efficiency to enhance productivity. 14, promoting and nurturing talent. And lastly, but not the least, 15, promoting long-term planning. I was just whispering to Mr. Speaker when I walked in. I said, Parliament still maintains the culture of timekeeping. I wish members of Parliament could take it away from Parliament and disseminate it countrywide. Here you are very punctual, elsewhere you are not. Mr. Speaker, let us all use this transformational culture to make our country more prosperous, graduating from lower middle income to a developing country by 2064 in a spirit of equity and inclusiveness. You heard me right, 2064 in a spirit of equity and inclusiveness, unless you don't want to plan. Critical issues facing the nation. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to address critical issues our nation is currently facing. We meet today at a time when the nation is going through a difficult phase. I meet Zambians from all walks of life who share their frustration with me on the ongoing load shedding and how this is negatively affecting their lives and businesses, whether big or small. No one is spared, not even myself. A few days ago, I was in Hero Stadium when there was a power failure. I don't know who doesn't know about this. I know how it feels to come back home and find that there is no electricity. Home, State House. Or to see children who cannot do their homework because there is no electricity. Or a mother who has no access or to alternative sources of energy to prepare a meal for her family. I'm also aware that the current power shortage has negatively affected those running small businesses like salons, barber shops, welding workshops, and bakeries, as I've already said. However, there are short-term measures that we as a country can take to minimize the demand for electricity, and these include the use of energy saver bulbs, the use of alternative sources of energy for cooking and heating. These certainly will reduce the demand for electricity, not to mention adopting the use of solar geysers as opposed to electric geysers. Mr. Speaker, to cushion the impact of the power shortage, government has taken measures which include importation of electricity from neighboring countries, adjusting the price of electricity for commercial entities to attract increased investment in electricity generation, developing alternative sources of energy such as solar, thermal, and promoting the use, like I've already said, of energy-efficient electric bulbs. Mr. Speaker, apart from the low water levels in Lake Kariba and Kafue River, the power shortage has been occasioned and exacerbated by Zambia's inability over the years to attract new investments in the electric generation sector on account of the low electricity tariffs. And to address this, the government has revised the tariffs upwards from an average retail tariff of 5.64 to 10.35 cents per kilowatt per hour. This will attract investment in the energy sector, particularly those interested in renewable energy such as solar, wind, and waste-to-energy projects. In view of our abundant deposits of coal, thermal energy in particular is going to be a very viable source of energy. I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that with these measures we have taken, we'll soon have a gradual reduction of power shortage, leading to an eventual surplus. In fact, in just 12 to 13 months from now, Zambia shall become a net exporter of energy. To protect low-income households from high electricity tariffs, a certain proportion of electricity will be reserved for low-income households. In this regard, government has increased the lifeline electricity consumption from 100 to 500 kilowatts per hour. This will result in a reduction in the amount of money spent on electricity bills by low-income households, while enabling them to use the electricity for basic necessities. Mr. Speaker, hunger has been stalking some of our people due to crop failure that followed the poor rains in the 2014-2015 farming season. In places like Sikongo, the situation has been like this for the past 2 consecutive seasons. The drought experience in these places means that our people face not only food, but water shortages as well. I would like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to assure our people in these drought-hit areas that their lives matter and matter most, and that this government will not forget them. Government has carried out an in-depth vulnerability and needs assessment in 48 districts in Central, Copperbelt, Eastern, Luapula, Muchinga, Northwestern, Southern, and Western provinces. And our immediate interventions include provision of relief food to 131,158 households, covering 798,948 people in 31 districts. Rehabilitation and sinking of 1,581 boreholes in all the 48 assessed districts, and provision of water supply through dams and water schemes. Going forward, government to provide agricultural inputs to 45,079 affected households in 27 districts, strengthen conservation farming implementation, and provide appropriate technologies for small-scale farmers. And additionally, government will strengthen epidemic preparedness and scale up supplementary and therapeutic feeding programs in selected districts where malnutrition is high. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to assure the nation that the country has enough maize stocks to support the 2015-2016 relief food program, and that government will, through the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, ensure that adequate food and water provisions are made available to all vulnerable households. In our cities, we have the ever-present challenge of children in distress, kids forced to live through a rough life on the streets by circumstances hardly of their making. These are our children. These are our nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. At a very tender age, they are exposed to begging and various antisocial vices and abuses, while exposed to the elements on the street and stalked by perpetual hunger and disease. We, as a people, cannot allow this to continue. Mr. Speaker, it is time we turned a new page on the plight of street kids. To this effect, I'm directing the ministers responsible for gender, youth and child development, and community services to expand the intake levels of street kids at our Zambia National Service camps for skills and entrepreneurship training. We need to give them hope again, and most importantly, opportunities for a better life. Mr. Speaker, hardly a day passes without having to hear or read about insinuations of tribalism. Mr. Speaker, hardly a day passes without having to hear or read about insinuations of tribalism. This country was not founded on divisive thinking or behavior that celebrates disunity and anarchy among us. It was founded on the firm principle of unity in diversity, and hence our national motto, One Zambia, One Nation. To this end, I wish to call on all Zambians to live and work in unity regardless of tribe. That is why I've embarked on an ambitious crusade to promote the unity of our people and our nation. And in this regard, I have met and will continue meeting and enlisting the wisdom and support of our traditional rulers and other stakeholders on this very critical issue. This is important if our country has to move forward in its social and economic and political development. I also wish to encourage other political leaders to join me in this crusade against tribalism in our society. As a practical measure to resolve the issue of tribalism, I'm directing the Minister of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs to work closely with the Royal Highnesses in resolving outstanding wrangles between chiefdoms. It is important to promote exchange visits between their Royal Highnesses as well as joint ventures in uplifting the lives of our people. Mr. Speaker, in my interaction with ordinary people, I'm always reminded of the difficulties that families go through each time the price of mealie meal goes up. Yes, I fully understand the frustrations of a farmer who works hard year in, year out, and still struggles to sell his or her produce and has to wait for months before getting paid. I'm also alive to the despair felt by young men and women constantly seeking but not finding jobs. Mr. Speaker, these are not just individuals but also national challenges that we must resolve with urgency in our quest for greater prosperity and inclusiveness. Mr. Speaker, we are dealing with high costs of mealie meal. By establishing 13 milling plants throughout the country, the milling plants will be managed by the Zambian Cooperative Federation, and the Zambia National Service will be able to achieve the objective of producing affordable mealie meal for the citizenry. This will also bring the market for maize closer to the farmers. The government is promoting skills development and employing opportunities for young people by establishing a school of milling technology under this initiative. It is indeed disheartening to see that the cooperative movement in Zambia, despite having been once upon a time so vibrant and an envy of countries within the region in East, Central, and Southern Africa and beyond, it is now in a state where it is struggling to make any notable contribution to our country's economy. I'm aware that in the 1980s, East African countries were sending their government officials to the Zambia Cooperative College to undertake study on how the Zambia cooperative movement had managed to reach that level of development. It is also worth mentioning that during this period prior to 1991, ZCF was the next largest single employer, only coming third to the civil service and ZCCM. This could have meant that cooperative movement was second in terms of contribution to the country's gross domestic product, GDP. Can you imagine where we could have been as a country and how much we could have gained economically had we continued with that level of development driven by the cooperative movement? I do not understand, therefore, why as government we decided to do away with this important development vehicle, all in the name of liberalization. During this era, the challenge of maize marketing or crop marketing was not an issue to talk about because cooperatives were engaged in maize marketing and crop marketing in general, buying maize and all sorts of crops from all small-scale farmers. There will be massive job creation in all the provinces once the cooperative movement has been revived to drive rural development. In 1969, President Kenneth Kaunda, through his Chifubu Declaration, declared cooperatives as a mass organization to be used for mass economic empowerment amongst Zambians through the promotion of community-based entrepreneurship amongst the many of our citizens using the cooperative model. There is need, therefore, to embark on the restoration process in order to revamp the cooperative movement in Zambia so that we can have a balanced job creation roadmap covering the whole country. Government will endeavor to reinstate the cooperative model of enterprise by building capacities of the cooperative structure in the country so that they stand on their feet again and provide employment to many of our women and youths. Vibrant cooperatives world over have been known to play a vital role in national development, both economic and social. Cooperatives are contributing immensely to economies of Europe, Asia, America, and some African countries. I don't see why not in Zambia. There is need for us to embrace cooperatives in our national development agenda, since it's a sustainable means of addressing high levels of unemployment and poverty. Most of us think that cooperatives are only for agriculture-related activities, such as maize and fertilizer. This is a very wrong understanding of cooperatives, as cooperatives cut across all sectors of an economy. Let me list some of the sectors where cooperatives can go a long way in helping job creation. Trading. Cooperatives can engage in general trading by opening multi-purpose shops. Tourism. Cooperatives can venture into hotel businesses and other hospitality industries. Transport. Cooperatives can venture into both passenger and commercial haulage. In service sector, our graduating nurses and doctors can form cooperatives and provide both nursing and medical services to the general public as opposed to looking for employment in government hospitals. They can form a nursing care cooperative society and become proud owners of that business. And this is true for all other services such as teaching, legal practices, engineering, and so on and so forth. We shall therefore engage the CF and put measures that will ensure that cooperatives across the country are revamped, and in return we expect to achieve the following. 1, massive and balanced employment creation. 2, poverty reduction. 3, increase in revenue collection arising from an increase in the tax base. 4, address the rural-urban migration challenge. And 5, address the challenges of agricultural marketing. Now, in order to steer development of 4 forms of cooperatives, I have decided to remove the agricultural veil from the face of the cooperatives in Zambia by moving the Department of Cooperatives from the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock to the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry. I have found it necessary to place cooperatives in a ministry with a generic face rather than it has been being seen only through agriculture or any other narrow perspective. Mr. Speaker, to address unemployment for our youths and women, government is actively pursuing the implementation of the industrialization and job creation strategy. Government is also implementing various empowerment schemes under the Ministry of Gender and Child Development, Youth and Sports, Commerce, Trade and Industry, Tourism and Arts, and Transport, Waste Supply and Communications. The combined provision for empowerment in general is 130 million kwacha for 2015. After broad-based consultation, the minister responsible for labor will bring to this House the Employment Amendment Bill aimed at regulating the casualization of labor, short-term contracts of employment, and undue termination of employment. Mr. Speaker, there have been concerns that Zambia is sliding back into the debt trap. For an economy that has grown from $3 billion GDP in 2005 to a $28 billion today, we are well within the acceptable international threshold of 40% of a gross domestic product. Government has borrowed mainly to finance roads, energy and infrastructure as a long-term investment that will spur accelerated economic development across sectors. Enhanced development will create the needed capacity to meet our debt obligations. To ensure that we repay our Eurobonds, government has established a sinking fund which is a special account for the sole purpose of meeting our Eurobond obligations as they fall due. Government's strategy focus to attain the Vision 2030 and beyond. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to the attainment of the Vision 2030 of becoming a prosperous middle-income nation. Beyond 2030, we aspire to be a developed country by 2064 through our transformation agenda, which prioritizes 7 thematic areas. These are diversification and sustainable development, infrastructure development, human capital development, democracy and good governance, gender and social protection, economic diplomacy, global partnerships, and national defense and cultural remodeling. I will now proceed to discuss each of these areas. Diversification and sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, Zambia's economy has been registering favorable gross domestic product growth rate over the past decade, averaging around 6%. However, government is aware of the fact that there is need for the economy to register at least 10% GDP growth rate that can have an effective impact on reducing poverty, which is currently around 60%. Our aim is to move forward a smart economy which is characterized by access to capital markets, talent, infrastructure, and reliable and predictable regulations. In addition, we need to promote a functional culture and social networks. Furthermore, we need to promote ethical behavior in public and private sectors anchored on zero tolerance to corruption. The Zambian population is projected to reach 52.1 million in 50 years' time. To attain our aspiration to be a developed country by 2064 and be able to support a population of that size, the economy needs to grow at a sustained double-digit GDP growth rate. And double-digit growth rate can be achieved if we embark on strategic and focused diversification interventions that create and generate new growth possibilities. History has examples of countries like Singapore and South Korea that have transformed into developed countries within a generation. And this is current history. This was a result of their strong will and determination. And it is therefore equally possible for us to attain this aspiration as long as we remain focused and determined as a nation. To implement our transformation agenda, we need a visionary leadership at all levels, a clear master plan for sustainable development, and a merit-based public service. Mr. Speaker, the starting point in promoting dynamic and strategically focused diversification and rapid growth is realignment of our institutions to promote synergies in the planning, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and coordination of national programs. I have, in this respect, decided to make the following changes. 1, the national planning function will be moved from the Ministry of Finance to form the new Ministry of Development Planning. The Ministry of Education, Science, Vocational Training and Early Education will be split into the Ministry of General Education and the Ministry of Higher Education. 3, the Ministry of Community Development, Mother and Child Health will be called Ministry of Community Development. This is after its mother and child health tag and function is reverted to the Ministry of Health. 4, the Ministry of Gender and Child Development shall be redesignated as the Ministry of Gender, while the function of child development moves to the Ministry of Youth and Sport, which now becomes the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Child Development. 5, the Ministry of Mines, Energy and Water Development will be split into 2. The Ministry of Mines and Mineral Development, 1, and 2, the Ministry of Energy and Water Development. 6, the Ministry of Transport, Waste Supply and Communication will be split into 2, with the Ministry of Waste and Supply remaining on one hand and the Ministry of Transport and Communication on the other. And 7, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock will be split into 2. The Ministry of Agriculture on one side and the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock on the other. Like I've already said, the cooperative function shall now fall under the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry at a directorate level. The name for the ministry will remain as it is. Mr. Speaker, in order to complement government efforts, Mr. Speaker, in order to complement government efforts in the delivery of public infrastructure, there is need to work with the private sector to find alternative ways of financing development. It is for this reason that a strong partnership is a necessity between government and the private sector as we seek to tap private sector resources for national development. It is in this regard that I direct that an autonomous body be created to professionally deal with public-private partnership matters. To this end, the State House, in liaison with Cabinet Office and relevant stakeholders, must spearhead the formation of this body, which will eventually be transferred to Cabinet Office. It is not right that well-meaning policies of public-private partnerships can be on our statute books for years without any tangible project seeing the light of the day. Mr. Speaker, it has been 6 long years since the House passed the PPP Act number 14 of 2009. It is for this reason that I do not expect government red tape to hinder this pronouncement. I expect all civil servants, relevant sector ministries to work towards the harmonization of the legal and institutional framework to actualize this pronouncement. Mr. Speaker, the record of our diversification program in the last 50 years has not been satisfactory. About 80% of our export earnings still come from copper, making the country highly vulnerable to fluctuations in the global economy. We need to draw lessons from countries that have succeeded in diversifying their economies. There are other copper-producing countries out there that have managed to diversify away from copper mining and export by establishing complete new industries and gone further to create sovereign wealth funds. Prioritization is key to successful diversification. In this connection, government will focus on promoting tourism and value addition to mineral and agricultural products, which have the greatest potential to contribute to rapid diversification of our economy. Our manufacturing sector must be driven by growth in agro-processing and forestry products, which will ensure that we do not export raw materials, but we add value to all our primary products. I am therefore directing the ministers responsible for tourism and industry to develop a strategically focused program of diversification in these priority areas and fast-track the establishment of the northern and southern tourism circuits, which have high potential to increase tourist arrivals and earnings. Further, I'm directing the ministers responsible for tourism and the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, to set up a special purpose vehicle through which all public tourism investment assets will be owned. Furthermore, the two ministers should work with local authorities to put in place measures that promote local tourism at district level. Local authorities should be championing the development of local tourism products in all our towns to expand foreign and domestic tourism. Mr. Speaker, to further promote tourism, the minister responsible for tourism and arts will bring to this House the Arts, Culture and Heritage Bill, aimed at harmonizing institutional arrangements in arts, culture and heritage to reduce overheads and promote cost-effectiveness. In addition, the minister will table the Zambia Institute of Tourism Studies Bill, aimed at transforming the Hotel and Tourism Training Institute Trust into a council and make it more accountable to stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, Zambia will soon ratify the tripartite free trade area agreement, which will make us part of the largest free trade area in Africa with a GDP of $1.3 trillion United States dollars and a population of over 650 million people, stretching from Cape to Cairo. We are also part of the negotiations for the establishment of a continental free trade area, which will create an even bigger market. These agreements will offer market access to Zambian entrepreneurs and innovators. To exploit these emerging opportunities, we must implement measures that will reshape our export earnings so that not less than 50% of our export earnings come from non-traditional exports by 2030. This will be achieved through transforming the country from being one of the largest exporters of copper in Africa to being one of the largest exporters of value-added products. It is therefore incumbent on us to ensure that our participation in regional integration does not result in Zambia becoming a market for the continent at the expense of local industry. We should be able to produce quality products that will compete favorably across the continent. Accordingly, our standardization and quality assurance systems must be restructured to provide traceability services that will be recognized and respected by all our trading partners. The country must industrialize rapidly, and this will entail rationalizing and strengthening the regulatory, legislative, and institutional framework to make Zambia a premier destination for foreign direct investment. Mr. Speaker, the minister responsible for industry will bring to the House the Zambia Development Agency bill aimed at aligning it with the new industrial policy, and further, a new companies bill will be presented to this House aimed at strengthening corporate governance and providing for the startup and functioning of small companies. Access to capital is a challenge for most of our entrepreneurs and innovators who wish to establish or grow their businesses. The cost of capital needs to be made affordable. I therefore urge the minister responsible for finance to put in place measures that will allow for long-term financing at affordable rates. I also call upon the private sector to establish venture capital funds that will facilitate the establishment of greenfield investments. Let me urge the private sector to partner with government to promote business incubation to enable our young innovators commercialize their ideas. Let me turn to agriculture. Mr. Speaker, yes again. Mr. Speaker, with its vast arable land and abundant water, Zambia has the potential to attain lasting food security at the household and national levels. We can also capitalize on these resources to make our country a regional agricultural hub and global exporter of processed agricultural products. To transform this potential into competitive advantage, government will continue introducing a broad range of policy reforms in the agriculture sector, starting with crop diversification. As a push for crop diversification, the range of crops in the Farmer Input Support Program has been expanded from maize to include rice, sorghum, cotton, and groundnuts. Further, the number of beneficiaries has increased from 500,000 in 2013-2014 agriculture season to 1 million this season. Government is in the process of implementing the electronic voucher system in the distribution of subsidized seed and fertilizer initially on a pilot basis in 13 districts during the 2015-2016 agricultural season. To promote efficiency and cost effectiveness in the supply and distribution of inputs under the e-voucher system, farmers will source inputs directly from agro-dealers. The e-voucher will also give farmers a wider choice of inputs, including those of livestock and fisheries. Mr. Speaker, government is concerned by the inability of Farmer Input Support Program beneficiaries becoming self-sustaining. Our objective is to help our small-scale farmers become self-sufficient and eventually graduate from government support. To this end, I'm directing the ministers responsible for finance and agriculture to come up with a mechanization program for small-scale farmers working in collaboration with the private sector and civil society. For agriculture to be transformed, we need to address the high cost of agricultural inputs. Our dependence on imported inputs makes our farmers uncompetitive in the region. Local production of inputs is critical in controlling and managing costs. Therefore, government remains committed to ensuring the success of Nitrogen Chemical of Zambia and other private sector manufacturers in order to broaden the country's manufacturing base for agricultural inputs. I call upon the private sector to invest in the production of fertilizer and other agricultural inputs. Mr. Speaker, in 2014, the Food Reserve Agency purchased 1,031,303 metric tons of maize and 1,115 metric tons of paddy rice at a cost of 1.4 billion kwacha. Government's objective is to leave the bulk of commodity trading to the private sector. Let me repeat this. Government's objective is to leave the bulk of commodity trading to the private sector, which includes the cooperatives, as I've already said. And in this regard, I'm encouraging farmers to form producer and marketing cooperatives to enable them to negotiate from positions of strength when dealing with private agricultural commodity dealers. I would also like to call upon the minister responsible for cooperatives to come up with measures to strengthen the institutional framework for cooperatives in the country. Let me take this opportunity to thank the hard-working Zambian farmers who have yet again met the challenges of producing enough food to feed our people. This was despite a partial drought that affected most parts of the country. It is for this reason that the grain produced under very difficult weather conditions should be safeguarded and stored in appropriate storage facilities to avoid wastage. Government, through the Food Reserve Agency, has embarked on providing overroofing facilities for storage sheds in 98 strategic locations across the country. This project, which is underway, is expected to be completed in 2016. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change on agriculture, government will bring 5,000 hectares under irrigation each year. By 2030, we should have over 75,000 hectares under irrigation. This would place a fifth of irrigable land under irrigation and expand production in this respect. I urge the minister responsible for agriculture to ensure speedy utilization of the $115 million USD under the Irrigation Development Support Program. Mr. Speaker, livestock development is critical to diversification, and it's for this reason that I've created the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries. To increase the population of livestock, government will double the number of livestock breeding centers from the current 10 to 20 by 2023, which will provide optimum service nationwide. The breeding centers to be established will be mostly for goats and sheep, which have a huge market in Africa and the Middle East. I know somebody is questioning, what about cows? You will be advised. There is rapid depletion of fish in our rivers and lakes due to intensive and unsustainable harvesting. Government is investing in sustainable management of the natural fisheries resources through restocking and working with the local communities in promoting sustainable fishing methods. To ensure that fish farming grows, government is establishing 2 fish hatcheries in each province and promoting private-owned hatcheries. And further, government will establish 1 community fish fingerling nursery in each district. Government will also train 1,400 fish farmers in fish feed production, and this will result in production of 80,000 tons of farmed fish and 90,000 tons of fish from natural fisheries, and achieve self-sufficiency within the next 3 years. Mr. Speaker, government has a duty to ensure that agricultural products being sold on our market are safe and of good quality. I'm therefore directing the ministers responsible for agriculture and trade to ensure that sanitary and the phytosanitary standards, phytosanitary, it's the same depending on which school you went to, are strengthened and strictly enforced. Our diversification agenda will not be complete without agro-processing. I'm encouraged by the efforts of some private sector agro-processors who are now exporting to parts of Africa, Europe, and Asia. I would, however, like to see an increased number of agro-processing companies establish business in Zambia. I am greatly concerned with the lack of progress on farm block development. I am, in this regard, directing the ministers responsible for agriculture and industry, working in conjunction with the Industrial Development Corporation to come up with urgent measures to speed farm block development. Broad-based citizens' economic empowerment. Mr. Speaker, government is committed to inclusive growth. As part of the transformation agenda, our economy must progressively be controlled by citizens. Government will therefore prioritize broad-based citizen economic empowerment. Government shall, in this regard, put in place interventions that will ensure that citizens have significant control of economic activities in the agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing sectors. These will be achieved through partnerships and joint ventures between foreign investors and our citizens. We must therefore facilitate access to affordable finance, technology, and entrepreneurial skills for our people to effectively participate in joint ventures and partnerships. Our citizen economic empowerment programs must be reformed to help Zambians establish small and medium enterprises. Government is a major consumer of goods and services in the economy. Despite measures to advantage citizen-owned enterprises through preferential procurement, many of our small and medium enterprises still lack the capacity to deliver quality products and services at competitive price. I'm therefore ordering the minister responsible for commerce to come up with measures for capacity building on our citizen-owned enterprises to become more competitive. Mr. Speaker, another measure to empower citizens is to enable them own shares in some of the state-owned companies in the country. The IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, will be an important tool in achieving this goal. All state-owned enterprises must ultimately list on the Lusaka Stock Exchange within the next 5 to 10 years so that we create opportunities for citizens to own these companies. Government has transferred its shares in all state-owned enterprises incorporated under the Companies Act and the Banking and Financial Services Act to the Industrial Development Corporation, and the Industrial Development Corporation will hold the shares on behalf of government and supervise all these state-owned enterprises. In this regard, state-owned enterprises will no longer be funded through the national budget. In this regard, state-owned enterprise will no longer be funded through the national budget. This action will reduce the burden on the Treasury significantly and help contain the fiscal deficit whilst freeing up the available scarce resources towards poverty reduction programs. All state-owned enterprises shall contribute to the sovereign wealth funds through dividends. Employment and productivity. Mr. Speaker, in our effort to diversify the economy and create more jobs, government is committed to ensuring that our